The morning sun hung low over the Adriatic, its golden rays glinting on restless waters that carried whispers of war. Across the shoreline of Epirus, the smoke of burning villages coiled into the sky, staining it with the bitter scent of charred timber and flesh. Cries echoed in the distance. Women clutching their children, men shackled, soldiers dragging the spoils of conquest through narrow streets. Amid the chaos, one figure stood tall upon the deck of a Roman trireme, a senator turned commander, Gaius Laevinus. His jaw was clenched, his eyes unblinking as he watched the land of the Greeks tremble beneath Rome's advance. The year was 280 BCE, and Rome, no longer a republic confined to the Italian peninsula, was casting its gaze across the sea. But this war was not born from ambition alone. It had been thrust upon them by the call of desperate allies, the city of Tarentum, once proud and wealthy, now fractured by arrogance and fear. Their insult to Roman envoys had set a chain of events ablaze. Rome, though weary from endless battles with Samnites and Etruscans, could not ignore the provocation. And now, for the first time in history, the legions of Rome would cross into the realm of the Greeks. Yet they did not march into battle against mere city-states or scattered kings. Waiting for them, across the smoke and marble of Epirus, was a man who carried the legacy of Alexander the Great, King Pyrrhus. A hush fell over the Senate chambers in Rome days before. When word first arrived, "The Greeks are coming," the words felt both alien and inevitable. Senators whispered of omens, generals spoke of glory, and common citizens prayed to the gods, uncertain whether the Republic had reached too far. Now, as the waves lapped against Roman hulls and banners snapped in the wind, the clash was no longer a question. It was destiny. Rome was about to test itself against the world's greatest warriors. The Senate chamber of Rome was never silent, but on that day, its marble pillars seemed to tremble beneath the weight of fury. The air was thick with shouts, the scrape of sandals, and the pounding of fists against wooden benches. "Tarentum has spat on our envoys," a senator bellowed, his face flushed red. "They humiliated our ambassadors, drove them from the harbor, and mocked the Republic itself. Shall we endure this insult?" The chamber roared in response. Some demanded war, others urged caution, yet all understood the gravity of the moment. Tarentum was not some minor hill town in Latium. It was a jewel of Magna Graecia, wealthy and proud, descended from the colonies of Sparta itself. The insult had been deliberate. When Roman ships entered the Gulf of Tarentum, seeking only to observe, perhaps to protect allies, the Tarentines struck, sinking vessels, drowning sailors, and jeering as Rome's ambassadors begged for reason. One envoy, Postumius, had been mocked in the theater, his toga soiled with wine and laughter. The dishonor burned like acid in Rome's heart. "War!" some cried. "Retribution!" others shouted. Yet behind the noise lurked uncertainty. For while Tarentum was arrogant, it was not foolish. They had allies beyond Italy, across the Ionian Sea, in the mountainous lands of Epirus, ruled by a king whose very name carried the shadow of Alexander, Pyrrhus. Far from Rome, the mood in Tarentum was one of defiance. The city's harbor gleamed under the southern sun, lined with marble columns and bronze statues. The people, drunk on wine and pride, laughed at Rome's indignation. "Romans?" one aristocrat scoffed, reclining at a symposium. "Farmers in armor. They fight Samnites and think themselves conquerors of the world. Let them come. We will teach them what it means to face Greeks." Yet beneath the bravado lay unease. Tarentum's citizens knew the Roman legions were no longer a provincial militia. They had beaten Samnites, Etruscans, and even the fearsome Gauls. To challenge Rome directly was madness. But their democracy, fractured and swayed by demagogues, could not admit weakness. It was then that a voice rose among them. "If we are to fight Rome, we must call upon a king." And so, envoys were dispatched across the sea to Epirus. They sought Pyrrhus, cousin to Alexander, a man restless with ambition, whose dreams outgrew his rugged homeland. In Epirus, King Pyrrhus sat upon a throne carved of dark wood, his armor gleaming in the torchlight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his eyes alight with the same fire that once burned in Macedon's greatest conquerors. Yet his kingdom was poor, his treasury strained, his ambitions restless. When Tarentum's envoys knelt before him, offering gold and ships, he leaned forward, listening not with caution but with hunger. "Rome," they said, "seeks to dominate all of Italy. If they are not stopped here, they will march upon Greece itself. Aid us, King Pyrrhus, and your name shall shine as brightly as Alexander's." The king's advisors counseled caution. Some reminded him that Rome's legions were untested against the phalanx, yet dangerous in their discipline. Others warned of the cost, the uncertainty. But Pyrrhus was already seeing visions, not of Italy alone, but of Sicily, Africa, perhaps even Carthage. He imagined himself a new conqueror, a name whispered with awe across the Mediterranean. He rose from his throne and declared, "I will go. I will bring fire to Rome, and the world will remember the might of Epirus." Back in Rome, the decision was made. War was declared. Legions mustered. Farmers left their plows. Smiths set aside their hammers, and the roads of Italy thundered with the march of soldiers. Standards rose above the dust, eagles glinting in the sun, drums beating like the heart of the Republic itself. General Lavinus, chosen to lead the first campaign, addressed his men. "We do not fight merely for vengeance," he said, his voice carrying across the field. "We fight for Rome's honor, for her future. The Greeks believe us to be barbarians, unworthy of empire. Let us show them what it means to stand against Rome." The soldiers roared, their voices echoing against the hills. Yet among them whispers passed of Pyrrhus, of his elephants, beasts never before seen in Italy, towering shadows said to crush men beneath their feet. The stage was set. Rome marched south, Tarentum braced for siege, and Pyrrhus prepared to sail. The Adriatic, once a sea of trade, now bristled with warships. Fishermen whispered of omens. Comets streaking across the night sky, storms gathering where none should be. In the temples of Rome, sacrifices were made, blood spilling on marble altars. In Tarentum, the people prayed not to the gods of Italy but to Athena, to Apollo, to Ares. And in Epirus, Pyrrhus sharpened his blade, whispering to himself of glory. The world held its breath. For the first time, Rome and Greece were about to meet in war, and nothing would ever be the same again. The harbor of Tarentum glittered in the moonlight as the first Epirot ships slipped across the dark waters. Their hulls cut through the sea like blades, carrying not merchants, not fishermen, but warriors, thousands of them. At their head stood King Pyrrhus himself, armor gleaming like fire beneath the torchlight, eyes fixed on the Italian shore. The people of Tarentum cheered from the docks, tossing wreaths of laurel, their voices echoing in drunken celebration. For them, Pyrrhus was salvation, a lion sent to defend their pride. Yet behind the cheers lurked unease. They had summoned a king, a foreigner, to fight their war. Would he be their savior or their master? As Pyrrhus disembarked, his presence filled the harbor. His soldiers, hardened veterans of Macedonian wars, marched in perfect phalanx, shields flashing, spears bristling like a forest of iron. And behind them came the shadows, elephants, monstrous shapes towering above men, their tusks capped with bronze, their trunks curling in restless hunger. The Romans had never seen such beasts before, and already rumors spread across Italy like wildfire. The king brings living towers of war. That night, as the wine flowed in Tarentum's great hall, Pyrrhus stood before the citizens. His voice was deep, commanding, echoing across marble walls. "You called for me, and I have come," he declared. "Rome believes herself mistress of Italy, but she has never faced soldiers like mine, nor elephants like these. Stand with me, and we shall break Rome's pride. Together, we will show the world that Greece is not yet finished." The Tarentines roared with approval. Yet Pyrrhus's gaze was cold, calculating. In his heart, Tarentum was not a partner, it was a stepping stone. Meanwhile, Rome stirred like a giant awakened. Messengers galloped along the Via Appia, carrying orders sealed with wax and stamped with the eagle. Legion after legion assembled, their soldiers armored in bronze and iron, short swords glinting at their sides, square shields painted with the red of Mars. General Publius Lavinus led the march south. He was no stranger to war, his face hardened by campaigns against Samnites and Lucanians. Yet as scouts brought word of Pyrrhus's arrival, he felt a chill in his bones. Rome had fought many enemies, but never one who claimed the legacy of Alexander. Still, he stood before his legions with pride. "Men of Rome," he shouted, his voice carrying across the campfires. "We have beaten Samnites, Gauls, and Etruscans. Now we face the Greeks, who believe themselves gods of war. Show them that discipline and courage will break their phalanx. Show them that Rome cannot be humbled." The soldiers pounded their shields, chanting Roma, Roma, as sparks from the fires rose into the night. But as Rome advanced, Tarentum faltered. The citizens, once defiant, began to doubt. The burden of war weighed heavily. Taxes rose, sons were conscripted, trade faltered. The wealthy whispered that perhaps they had been too hasty in mocking Rome. The poor grumbled that Pyrrhus cared little for Tarentum, treating the city as his base rather than his ally. Some even sent secret messages to Rome, offering surrender if their wealth was spared. Pyrrhus learned of their treachery. One evening, he strode into the Tarentine assembly, flanked by his guards. His voice thundered across the chamber. "You invited me here, and now you conspire against me? Hear me well. Tarentum is no longer free. While I stand upon this soil, your city is mine. Your sons will march in my army, your wealth will fund my campaign. Betray me again, and you will hang from your marble gates." The assembly fell silent. The people of Tarentum had traded Rome's wrath for Pyrrhus's chains. But as Rome advanced, Tarentum faltered. The citizens, once defiant, began to doubt. The burden of war weighed heavily. Taxes rose, sons were conscripted, trade faltered. The wealthy whispered that perhaps they had been too hasty in mocking Rome. The poor grumbled that Pyrrhus cared little for Tarentum, treating the city as his base rather than his ally. Some even sent secret messages to Rome, offering surrender if their wealth was spared. Pyrrhus learned of their treachery. One evening, he strode into the Tarentine assembly, flanked by his guards. His voice thundered across the chamber. "You invited me here, and now you conspire against me? Hear me well. Tarentum is no longer free. While I stand upon this soil, your city is mine. Your sons will march in my army, your wealth will fund my campaign. Betray me again, and you will hang from your marble gates." The assembly fell silent. The people of Tarentum had traded Rome's wrath for Pyrrhus's chains. In most lands, such a defeat would break a people's spirit. But Rome was no ordinary state. As survivors limped home, the Senate convened once more. Some urged negotiation, others revenge. One senator rose, his voice steady despite the weight of loss. "Yes, Pyrrhus has elephants. Yes, he has the phalanx. But hear me well, Rome does not kneel. We have lost battles before, but never have we lost the war. Let us raise new legions. Let us march again. If Pyrrhus thinks Rome can be broken, let him learn what it means to face a republic that never dies." The Senate thundered with approval. Recruitment began anew. Boys barely of age donned helmets. Veterans strapped on their swords once more. Farmers left their fields. Rome would not surrender. Pyrrhus, recognizing Rome's resilience, sought another path. He sent his trusted advisor, Cineas, to the Senate with terms. Rome would abandon the Greek cities of the south, and in return Pyrrhus would make peace. Cineas, skilled in persuasion, dazzled the senators with eloquence. Many were swayed, eager to end the bloodshed. Yet one man rose, an old, blind senator named Appius Claudius. His voice, though frail, carried thunder. "Romans," he declared, "do not sell your freedom for peace. We have lost one battle, but so has Pyrrhus. Shall we surrender Italy because of beasts and foreigners? No. As long as one Roman can lift a sword, Rome shall never bow." The Senate erupted. Cineas returned to Pyrrhus, shaking his head. "You fight not against men," he said, "but against a city of kings." And so the war dragged on. Rome raised fresh armies. Pyrrhus fought battle after battle, each one at terrible cost. At Asculum, his elephants again brought victory, but the casualties were crippling. His allies grew restless, his treasury strained, his soldiers weary. Meanwhile, Rome grew stronger with each defeat, her people hardened by suffering, her legions more disciplined than ever. Pyrrhus began to see the truth. He could win battles, but not the war. The morning mist clung to the hills near Asculum, heavy with the scent of dew and smoke from distant campfires. Two armies prepared once again to clash. Rome with her steel-hearted legions, and Pyrrhus with his phalanx, his elephants, and his fading dreams of empire. The king stood before his men, cloak rippling in the breeze, helmet crest burning like fire beneath the sun. His voice rang out across the field. "Soldiers of Epirus, today we strike the Romans again. They are stubborn, relentless, but not immortal. One more victory, and Italy will bow to us. One more victory, and my name will stand beside Alexander's." The men cheered, but it was a weary cheer. For many, it was not the promise of glory but the memory of Heraclia's carnage that haunted them. Across the plain, the Roman consul Publius Decius Mus prepared his own soldiers. His father and grandfather had given their lives in battle for Rome, devoting themselves as sacrifices to the gods of the underworld. He was ready to do the same. "Men of Rome," he cried, "we face a king who believes victory lies in beasts and phalanxes. But you have something greater, you have Rome in your hearts. Today we fight not for gold, nor for kings, but for the Republic, for our families, for the eternal city. Show Pyrrhus that Rome cannot be conquered." The soldiers roared, pounding their shields in thunderous rhythm. The sound rolled across the valley like a storm. The battle began with a rain of javelins. Roman pila arced high, crashing into the dense wall of the phalanx. The Greek spearmen lowered their sarissas, advancing in unison, an iron tide sweeping across the earth. The Romans charged, swords flashing, shields locking in disciplined ranks. Where the phalanx pressed, the Romans bent but did not break, maneuvering between the forests of spears, striking at flanks, hacking at legs. The ground shook with the clash of iron, the screams of dying men, the relentless pounding of war drums. Then came the elephants. Their trumpets split the air, monstrous cries that froze the bravest hearts. They lumbered forward, tusks goring, trunks sweeping soldiers aside like children's toys. Roman cavalry panicked, scattering across the field. The legions buckled, chaos spreading as the beasts plowed through their lines. But Rome had learned. At Heraclea, the elephants had shattered them. Here they were ready. Soldiers hurled flaming javelins tipped with pitch, torches blazing, arrows whistling fire into the elephants' hides. Some beasts panicked, turning against their own men, trampling phalanx lines in wild terror. The field became a storm of dust, blood, and smoke. Victory swayed back and forth like a pendulum. First Rome, then Pyrrhus, then Rome again. In the thick of battle, Consul Decius Mus saw his soldiers faltering. The elephants pressed hard, and the phalanx advanced once more. He knew what he must do, what his bloodline demanded. He lifted his arms to the sky, calling upon the gods of the underworld. "I, Decius Mus, devote myself to death, for the salvation of Rome." Then, with reckless courage, he charged headlong into the enemy lines. Alone, he cut down Greeks with savage blows, his eyes blazing with divine fury. The enemy swarmed him, spears piercing, swords cutting, until at last he fell beneath a rain of iron. But his sacrifice was not in vain. His men, seeing their consul give his life, surged with renewed fury. They hurled themselves at the phalanx, breaking through with cries of vengeance. At last, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, the battlefield fell silent. Rome had retreated, bloodied once more. Pyrrhus stood victorious again. But the cost was unbearable. Thousands of his best men lay dead. His elephants, once symbols of terror, were crippled or slain. His allies murmured of betrayal, of abandoning a war that drained them dry. Pyrrhus walked among the corpses, his armor stained with blood, his crown heavy upon his brow. Victory should have tasted sweet, but instead it felt like ash. When his officers hailed him, he shook his head and whispered the words that history would never forget. "Another such victory, and I am lost." It was not triumph, it was revelation. Pyrrhus had seen the truth. Rome could be beaten on the battlefield, but never broken. For every legion slain, another rose. For every defeat, the Republic grew stronger. Back in Rome, messengers delivered grim news of the defeat. Mothers wept for their sons. Widows tore their garments. Fathers clenched their fists in silence. But no one spoke of surrender. The Senate gathered, and though sorrow hung in the air, their decision was resolute. "We have lost another battle," one senator declared. "But Rome has not fallen. Pyrrhus bleeds as we do. His victories are no victories at all. We will raise new legions. We will march again. Rome shall endure." The words spread through the city, carried on lips, carved into hearts. Children played in the streets, pretending to be legionaries, shouting Roma invicta, Rome unconquered. The people believed, and belief made them unbreakable. For Pyrrhus, the veil was lifted. He had come to Italy dreaming of empire, of glory, of a second Alexander. Instead, he found a foe unlike any he had ever faced. Not because of weapons or beasts or numbers, but because of spirit. Rome would not kneel. Rome would not yield. Rome would fight and fight and fight, until her enemies lay broken, not on the battlefield, but in their very will to continue. As Pyrrhus stared across the battlefield of Asculum, at the Romans retreating in perfect order even after defeat. He realized the terrible truth. He could win every battle, but Rome would win the war.